Hello and welcome to our presentation on the employment relations and their differences in Australia, China, and Germany. In our presentation, we're going to touch upon the main characteristics of employment relations found within these countries, what are the differences, what drives them, and finally, how COVID has now impacted employment relations within these countries. The main characteristics, firstly, I would like to touch upon is what is employment relations. It's a multidisciplinary field that deals between the relationships shared between employers and employees and how this is structured in different countries in different ways based on their legal and political nature. To come to an overview of the countries that we're going to be discussing, it is Australia, China, and Germany. In Australia, they follow a parliamentary democracy, which means that all of the regulations pertaining to labours and trade unions passes through the national government in collaboration with six other states. In Germany, they follow a coordinated market economy, which means that it's very collaborative, and employers and employees work together to create a positive relationship. So all regulations and rules that are passed by and how the economy, how the labor economy is structured is jointly discussed between these two parties. There are three associations involved in Germany, which is the trade associations, special employers associations, and chamber of industry and commerce. It is the chamber of industry and commerce that actually indulges in collective bargaining, which is very big in Germany, and that is how terms and conditions are agreed upon. It's through collective bargaining of all of these associations with organizations and government to come to an agreement. In China, they follow a communist party approach where everything is discussed by the government and then executed within the country. There is no real sense of pluralism that is integrated within employment relations in this country. This will be delved into more detail by my teammates. As well as COVID and its impact on the economy, we already know that hours have been cut and a number of people have lost out on jobs. Unemployment is on the rise, which will also be touched upon in further detail and how this differs and how each of these countries have dealt with it differently. I would like to let my other teammates carry on the discussion.
So let me introduce some differences between trade unions in the three countries. First of all, the Chinese trade unions are a pyramid organization system under the leadership of Communist Party of China. The All China Federation of Trade Union is the only legal official union. Self-established trade unions that are independent of the system are not allowed. But German and Australian trade unions are non-government independent social group organizations, and workers in the various industry can form the trade union voluntarily and legally. The trade unions in China are seriously administrationalized and a lack of democracy. Most of the union leaders is held concurrently by the enterprise manager, and the functions of trade unions are greatly weakened in recent years. German law gives union the right to strike, but also stipulates that strikes must take place only after collective bargaining has broken down. The Australian trade union represents its members and employers through a system of the collective bargaining to protect their interests. So overall, there is a general tendency toward less trade union membership commitment among employees in all three countries from 1980s, and also the decline in trade union density. The increasing unemployment in all three countries from that time may be an important factor. So move on to the globalization. The global competition has intensified, and that the consequence of the globalization is a need for more flexible, more individualized, and more market-based system of handling pay and working conditions. Decentralized collective agreement have spread into in the three countries, especially in Germany. This tendency towards decentralization has been viewed with skepticism by the trade union. So in terms of differences in the social and institutional basis of trade unions in the three countries, Germany trade unionism is as class-based, dealing with the traditional interests of the working class, focus more narrowly on the pay and working conditions, but also when trade unions focus on broader political and social rights related to the working class. The Australian trade union as what could be called market-based focused mostly on narrow interests of their members. Broader political interests have only played a secondary role. And Chinese trade union as nation-based played an important role in nation-building processes. Trade unions have dealt with the pay and working conditions of the employees, but in many situations, policies have been related to the general interest of the nation.
Hello everyone, this is Wan Haoyu. The main representation of employees in Germany is guaranteed by the Work Councils and the Confederation of Germany Employers Association and the COMPAS, or the employer associations that cover the industry and regions. These associations are the one responsible for the collective bargaining in Australia. The peak body of employee association is the Australian Council of Trade Unions. Of course, the Business Council of Australia is representing the employers in the company in Australia. For the China, CEC and CDA is actually the same institution and with two names. They are called China Enterprise Federation for short. The difference of these three countries is collective bargaining responsibility. For Australia and the China, they emphasize on the role of the government and the limitation of the function of trade unions, which are differences to the Germany. And Australia has more centralizing the role of government. And what drives these differences? In my opinion, political structure drives those differences comes. Thank you, that's it.
Due to the pandemic of COVID-19, the war-industrial relations have been greatly impacted as a result of major changes to work and the labor market. It is also no different for Australia, Germany, and China. This global crisis affected people in two profound ways: the mobility restriction, which resulted in work-from-home arrangements, and the lack of job security and working hours reduction that led to a significant rise in unemployment rate. To be specific, during the first quarter of 2020, around 1 in 5 workers in Australia either lose their job or had their peak work hours cut down. Especially those aged under 30 lost jobs are at a particular high rate. And according to Leung in China, more than 460,000 businesses have been shut down, along with a dramatic rise in unemployment. And in Germany, even though employment has not significantly declined, but unemployment rate had risen to almost 20% until April of 2020. So a number of other changes to work practices have occurred as a result of COVID-19, with both benefits and challenges for workers. As for Australians, the government had created a scheme for employees called JobKeeper to financially helping business support their employees. However, the industrial relations reform to post-COVID economy is still questionable, especially when unions consequently have been weakened, as the industrial relations parties have been forced to accommodate regulatory change. So overall, workers and governments face these major challenges in the medium to long term, which are structural change in labor reallocation, employment for young workers, industrial relations reform, long-term unemployment, and the refinement of the JobKeeper program. Similarly, the German government had been working on the new forms of work in order to cope with the labor market impact of the coronavirus pandemic. Specifically, is to decide on a softening of eligibility requirements for short-term work. Take-up has been high over the first weeks. And the main challenges have to do with overcoming skills shortages, accelerating this digitization, and adapting skills accordingly, and reviewing labor market regulations and social protection to deal with new forms of work. As for China, aside from the unemployment challenge, the global pandemic has severely affected the employment of women, since a large proportion are working in the hardest hit sectors, and also because of women's expected duty of family care. Another major challenge for the Chinese government is the risks for the small and medium-sized enterprises, which employed around 80% of the workforce in the enterprises. Since the smaller enterprises have the least reserves, they are at greatest risk during the downturn, which was highlighted in these two surveys.
So as you can see, alongside employers' associations, trade unions are the key collective actors in industrial relations system in all three countries. Yet there are still differences in collective agreements and regulation in these systems, and workforces are protected by trade unions. Overall, despite the differences in employee relation model, all countries are going through significant changes and challenges caused by COVID-19 that directly damage the industrial relations.